Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again. I'm going to do a trailer review now for the eagerly anticipated Dune movie, which is a big budget, upcoming science fiction adaptation of the original 1965 novel written by Frank Herbert. This will be directed by Denis Villeneuve, who directed other movies such as Prisoners in 2013, starring Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, Sicario in 2015 with Emily Blunt and Benicio del Toro, Arrival the following year in 2016 with Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, and most recently, of course, Blade Runner 2049 with Ryan Gosling and the original actor Harrison Ford. There's been a lot of anticipation with this movie and I'm a bit unsure why, because it's really a cult property. So the original setup of the Dune story is that we are in the future. We've got very much of a dystopian society and we have a main character who is called Paul Atreides, and he has the responsibility of looking after the planet Arrakis. Now this planet is very vital because it's the source of a substance known as melange, or the splice, which is a drug that can extend life and enhance mental abilities. And over the course of the whole story we get various societies and governments, etc., all vying and battling for the control over the planet and this really important substance. Most infamously, there was a 1984 film adaptation directed by David Lynch starring Carl McLachlan in his movie debut, along with the likes of Patrick Stewart, Max von Sydow and Sting, of course, making his notorious appearance. And the film didn't do very well at the box office. It had a 14 million budget and didn't even break even, and it was very much derided amongst critics and audiences on its release. And to be honest with you, I'm very surprised about all the hype and anticipation over Dune. I do appreciate that every book or novel series or original property will always have its own set of fans, but I don't think the Dune books or the Dune property itself is a big enough IP to merit a big budget movie. I understand that Hollywood is struggling for ideas and looking for new concepts and storylines, but I don't think Dune was one of those that really would have come up the top of your list as projects to be adapted. So I'm a bit surprised about all the hype surrounding this trailer and the fact that they're putting in over 100 million budget behind this movie, when you consider the likes of Blade Runner, a property that was revered amongst many movie fans, didn't do very well at the box office. So I'm very surprised that we're getting this movie with such a huge budget. So we're going to talk now about the trailer itself, and I think overall it was a fine trailer. I think it was a big fade in terms of the story details, but it had very good visuals and there was enough there to keep me interested to see what they will do with this project going forward. Now, of course, when we look at the first couple of scenes of the trailer, the main focus is on the lead protagonist. I assume this will be named Paul as well, just like we did with the original source material. And the first couple of scenes here, we see him taking this test where he has to put his hand in the box. I think that recreates the scene that we had from the 1984 movie. And this is just a test of his pain and how much he can tolerate, with the woman instructing him. And I thought this was Helen Mirren, but I don't think it is. But anybody correct me in the comments, but it looks like Helen Mirren to me in this clip. But if we carry on, we see him in these combat scenes training with Josh Brolin on here. So I imagine this will be the early part of the movie where we establish Paul's importance and we see him developing his skills, and we get an understanding of the bigger role that he has to play within this story. We get further hints of him finding out about his role and purpose, where he mentions all of these dreams and visions that we have. We have these quick cuts where we see Zendaya standing in the desert and he's cutting back and forth as he wakes up again. I think again this will be the early part of the movie where we see him just finding about himself and discovering who he is. We get further hints about his descendants and that they've tried to rule before, presumably trying to control the planet Arrakis, and that Paul has to learn about how to rule others. His father is trying but failing, so again I think this is reference to the fact that he's trying to bring the Arrakis society under control but is struggling to do so. We get those earlier shots of Oscar Isaac, I believe, maybe he is the father role, We get further sentences from Paul that his family is being hunted down and picked off one by one. So I think this is reference to the fact that we have other people trying to take control of Arrakis, and each time one of Paul's descendants have tried to control the planet, they've ended up being murdered or taken out or captured, and he's next in line to be the next person to try and get control of this planet. We later, of course, we see Jason Momoa, really typically being Jason Momoa. We see a lot of him here taking down the shoulders. So I think if we look at his casting, they're clearly tapping into the persona that we've familiarized ourselves with Jason Momoa from Game of Thrones and Aquaman. He's got that very dude bro kind of attitude. We see those scenes where he goes up and hugs the lead character. If there's going to be moments of humor or charisma or personality, I think it's very much going to come from Jason Momoa, and I think that's fitting into his wheelhouse as a performer, so there's no problem there. And then the music theme kicks in, and then we get very good shots of, we see armies approaching and charging, we get explosions, we get all these scenes where we see desert monsters and pits, very similar to the Sarlacc pit from Return of the Jedi, but visually it looks very good. I like that scene where Josh Brolin is holding up the main character and we get that bird's eye shot view of the desert monsters as they're trying to go into the ship, so that's very good as well. So visually, all the shots and sequences, they look very good. That's what you'd expect. And one thing you can note about Denis Villeneuve's directing style is that he does have a very pleasing aesthetic. It's got this very dry, muted coloured look about it, but it all looks very good, especially on the big screens. One thing I want to note about as well is that if we look at the trailer and the way the scenes intercut and we look at the various characters, we seem to be going back and forth between the past and the present. We see all of these characters at various stages. So for example, we see Jason Momoa in some scenes where he's got his hair tied back and he's got a beard and he looks very older, and then we see other scenes where he's clearly shaven and he looks a lot younger. We get scenes of Zendaya where she's standing, as I mentioned before, in these desert like environments, and then we get shots of her later on where she's got her hair tied back and she's in that kind of more soldier like armor. Remind me a bit of Battle Angel Alita, but she looks a lot older on here. So, and we get various shots of Dave Bautista and Oscar Isaacs as well at different stages of the story, so it looks that we may get a lot of shifting in between the narrative. Now that can be a good and bad thing, because for me, I hope that we don't get this storytelling trait that we've seen in a lot of recent movies and series where we like to keep jumping back and forward in terms of the narrative. I like that more linear chronological storytelling. If you go particularly by most recently the likes of The Witcher, and one of the big complaints about that show is that how we kept jumping back and forth at different stages of the narrative, and it's very disorientating as a viewer to keep up with the story if you keep jumping all over the place at various stages of the narrative. So I am looking forward and hoping that we do get a much more of a linear, straightforward storytelling as we learn about these characters. But we've got a huge wealth of actors that a lot of us in fandom today will be very much familiar with. We see them in various scenes on this. So of course we have Rebecca Ferguson, who recently we remember was from Mission Impossible Fallout. We have Dave Bautista, of course, that we know from the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. We have Oscar Isaac, of course, who was Poe Dameron, of course, from the Disney Star Wars trilogy. We have Zendaya, who we know from the Spider-Man MCU movies. So there's a huge cast on here, as well as Jason Momoa, of course, who we know from Game of Thrones and Aquaman. So that's probably one of the biggest selling points, is that we have an extensive amount of actors who I think overall are very good performers, and I think they'll serve the movie very well. The movie itself, from this trailer, seems to have a very serious and bleak dystopian tone. I think that's very much in fitting with the source material on here. It's good that they're taking the subject and the source material very seriously. As I mentioned before, I think any moments of humour will primarily come from Jason Momoa. I also mentioned, of course, Josh Brolin, as we know from multiple movies as well, the likes of The Goonies and No Country for Old Men, and of course he was in Deadpool as well as playing Thanos in Infinity War. So the cast is exemplary, and we just get that final shot where we see them running away from, I guess, another sand monster, and again it just reminds me a lot of the Sarlacc pit from Return of the Jedi. But it all looks very good, all visually looks very great. I think the key here is how can they make the story very much engaging. Now, Denis Villeneuve, as I mentioned before, he has a good aesthetic and a good visual style with his movies, but I think the problem he has is that they can feel very cold and a bit impersonal and sometimes a bit disengaging from the characters. And I think it's very key here that if Dune is to be a success and go on to be the next big science fiction franchise, then you have to make sure that audiences, especially non-fans, can connect with these characters. And I think the second trailer, whenever it's released, has to do a much better job of just establishing more of the story and the plot, because I think this first trailer here was more to give a visual sense and a visual flavour of what Dune is and a kind of tone that we will be looking at when looking at this movie. But I think from a narrative and a story and a concept point of view, it needed to do more, especially to pull in non-fans. I think fans of the book or the 1984 movie will already be very excited. There's going to be various scenes that they'll see here and they'll connect and reference to from the previous movie or the novel, so they're already in. But I think you need to attract more non-fans of the book or the 1984 movie as well. So the main actor on here, his name is Timothée Chalamet. Again, I haven't really seen any main movies that he's been in, so kindly inform me in the comments of any big series or television movies that he's been in previously. But he looks the part. Yeah, they've gone obviously for a very youthful, very energetic type of persona here, and yeah, he does nothing wrong on here. Again, hopefully the second trailer will get to see a bit more about his personality and his story overall. But he looks fine on here. Zendaya looks great. Everybody looks great. Oscar Isaac looks great. Josh Brolin looks good on here. I think he looks like he's going to be the original mentor of the character. And then later on, I think we'll get more of a dynamic between Timothée Chalamet and Jason Momoa. But yeah, visually very good, very striking. Maybe lacking a bit of charm, maybe seeming a bit humorless, but I think that's in keeping with the dystopian tone of the subject matter. Great cast, great soundtrack, as you expect, of course, being composed by Hans Zimmer, so you'd expect nothing less. But I just think just a bit lacking in terms of the concept and the story, and I think they have to be wary when they're marketing this movie that they don't alienate non-fans, because that's the key if you want to indeed make this a science fiction franchise. And many people have reported that the concept or the source material that Denis Villeneuve is adapting is only really one part or one segment of the overall Dune story. Apparently it's this very complex and expansive science fiction story, so if they want to see the realization and completedness of that story, then they have to make sure that they make it accessible to non-fans as well as original hardcore fans as well. So those are my thoughts on the Dune movie trailer for you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you notice at the end shot of this trailer, it says due to release in theatres and there's no date. Now, we know recently, due to the performance of Tenet, which was recently released, that the numbers were not primarily spectacular, and I think that's to be expected in this pandemic that we're currently in. So I think the fact that Tenet hasn't been this mind-blowing success that we were perhaps hoping for is making the studio perhaps rethink again about whether Dune will be released this year. In fact, a lot of people are suspecting that this will be primarily moved to next year, and I think that makes sense in the current climate that we're in. But I will keep you informed if I hear any more news on here. But as I said before, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you're a fan of the source material or the 1984 movie, I'm pretty sure you'll be very excited and hyped up for this. But if you're a non-fan, are you excited? Are you as hyped up about this movie, or did you find it was a little bit vague, a little bit too mysterious, and not giving you enough in terms of the story and the concept in order to get you fully engaged and invested into this movie? So those are my thoughts for now. Please hit those like and subscribe buttons and help me grow this channel in the future so I can provide you with more content. Look at the channel playlist so you can also find, as well as movie reviews, sports analysis, drawing and art videos, characters that I draw my own art style, and also pop culture commentary and sports analysis. So those are my thoughts for now on the trailer for Dune. Let me know what you think in the comments below. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.